Today, we become legends.
Many of Smite's gods are pretty different now than they were at release. Some have been reworked entirely, but most changes are more like tweaks than complete reworks. So today we're going to look at some of those with 20 features that were added to gods kits after their release. If you have any other features you know about that weren't in this video, then definitely leave them down below and I may feature them in a part 2 of this video. And also if you like the idea of the same thing but for removed features, I could try that too because there's a few of those I've got in mind, but let's get into this. Also, in case it wasn't clear, this won't include any abilities or gods that were reworked majorly. This video is for tweaks and additional features that were added to improve existing gods, not complete reworks. However, if you're looking for more information on reworked gods, I'll link some videos I've made on them in the past for you down below, but let's jump in. Feature number 1, Nemesis being able to use abilities and auto attacks in between her dashes, and also getting a double dash always instead of just when hitting an enemy. So this one is pretty interesting. Nemesis at her release wasn't intended to be able to just double dash as she does now. Her intended mechanic for the one at release was actually if she dashed through an enemy god, so like dealt damage with the first dash, she'd be able to dash again, but if she didn't hit anyone with the first dash, she wouldn't get the second one. However, it was bugged at release and she was just double dashing no matter if she hit someone or not, and eventually they just added that in as a mechanic instead of it being a bug. And also the ability to use dashes and auto attacks in between the dashes was another feature they added. When Nemesis was originally released, you just had to dash and then dash again. You couldn't like auto attack in between, use your 2 or your 3 or anything like that. Feature number 2, Raven's 2 having CC immunity. So when Raven was originally released, his 2 came with only damage immunity but not CC immunity, which did seem a bit strange. A lot of people at release kind of complained that like this ability really feels like it should have CC immunity, and obviously it feels a lot better now that it does have that feature. I think maybe they weren't trying to like directly copy Changa's 2 too much, so they wanted to make it a little more unique by only having damage immunity, but it just felt really weak and clunky when it didn't have the CC immunity, so they added that later. Feature number 3 is probably the most important one on this list, KUZENBO being able to have multiple NENES alive at once. Who says KUZENBO should be restricted to having just one child? Let him have as many as he wants. Nah, but in all seriousness, KUZENBO used to only be able to have one NENE Kappa out at once, and given the cooldown reduction on his 2, which was also buffed, where it reduces the cooldown of his 1 and 3, that was buffed since release. And it was possible to sort of fire 2 NENE Kappas at once, but it would despawn the first one. Well, now that's no longer the case, obviously. You can have multiple NENE Kappas out at any one time. Feature number 4, Daji being able to cancel the power law and jump from it early. So when Daji was originally released, she was a very clunky god and a lot of things actually required changes for her, but one of the things they changed was allowing her to jump down from the power law as early as she wanted, where you can essentially right click and jump straight down like as soon as you've hit someone with a chain. At Daji's original release, you had to just kind of wait out the full duration, so even if you'd fired all 3 chains and like got people ready to be pulled, you essentially just had to wait it out and like stand on the pillar until like the full duration of the ultimate expired, which was a bit strange and obviously made it very telegraphed, and now you can kind of like snap pull people without them being able to react to it. You couldn't really do that at Daji's release. Feature number 5 is a pretty simple one, ARACHNE's ultimate and 1 applying anti-heal. When ARACHNE was originally released, people like sort of touted him as a healer counter because of the way that his 3 works, where it stuns you if you are healed. And also his original release, his 3 sort of stunned you for longer based on how many ticks of healing you receive, so it was better against like tick healers. But yeah, they added the feature to have anti-heal to his 1 and his ultimate, making him sort of more of a true healer counter. Feature number 6, THOR's ultimate taking mana even if you don't actually fire it. It takes mana as soon as you charge it. So at THOR's original release, it cost no mana to be able to just like start charging THOR ultimate, and this led to situations where people would just kind of like sit at the back of a fight constantly charging THOR ultimate ready to be fired because there was no cost to doing so really. Like it made a lot of noise and kind of alerted enemies to where you were, but usually that's not a big deal and people would just kind of sit at the back of fights charging it up ready to fire it. And also people would spam it, which was quite annoying. Like you would just spam constantly activate, deactivate, activate, deactivate, and spam that ooh voice line like constantly. So that was pretty annoying. And yeah, that was probably part of the reason why they added a mana cost to this ability just for charging it. So yeah. Feature number 7, KUANG's ultimate, restoring his health when he kills an enemy with the execute. This is pretty simple. He just didn't heal originally when he would execute people with this ultimate. They added that in later. Feature number 8, ARACHNE's ultimate spawning a web area where she lands. So ARACHNE's ultimate has always been on like the weak side of ultimates, in my opinion, and on her original release, it was literally just like you would jump up onto the web and jump back down. She didn't have that sort of web area that she gets now, where it like slows people where she lands. They want to kind of incentivize ARACHNE to engage a little more with the ultimate because it's often used for disengaging, so they added that like slow area where like you can kind of dive on people and lock them down. That wasn't around at her release, so yeah, interesting feature. Feature number 9, KABRAKAN's passive affecting himself. So for those who don't know, KABRAKAN's passive gives damage mitigation to all nearby allies, and in Smite, allies counts you, usually, that's how it works, but with KABRAKAN's original release, it just didn't affect him for some reason. Like, it took a long time for them to actually change this, so I assume it wasn't a bug and was actually like an intended feature that it only affects allies and not KABRAKAN himself. But a little bit later on after his release, when they've been buffing him a little bit, they made it so his passive affected himself. Feature number 10, BACCHUS' CHUG being available at level 0 with no point investment. So this one was actually a pretty big feature that they added and actually sort of rocketed BACCHUS to like top tier for a little while. I think it was the start of season 6. It was the start of some season. I don't think it was season 5, so I think it was probably the start of season 6 when this happened. But yeah, they essentially made it so BACCHUS could chug in base now and like be drunk as soon as he got to lane, because he could chug without having any point investment in the ability itself, so that was pretty powerful when they originally added that. And on a similar note, feature number 11, Tier's stand switch being available at level 0 with no point investment as well. So once again, prior to this change, when Tier was originally released, he would have to invest a point into his stance change to actually be able to change stances, so normally that would happen at like level 3, whereas now Tier can like stand switch at level 1, which makes him a pretty big monster in like the first 2 levels, whereas before he wasn't quite as bad. Feature number 12, Chuk's passive reducing the cooldown of the ability by 2 seconds as well as having no mana cost. So originally, Chuk's passive would only give like a free ability every 5 auto attacks, but now that free ability also has a reduced cooldown, which is pretty interesting. Feature number 12, JANUS' ultimate having CC immunity and also being able to move during the cast. So this is a pretty interesting one because JANUS' ult upon his original release was like so terrible, dude. It was like, it didn't come with any CC immunity, so you could be interrupted during the channel time of the ultimate, which is like, 1 or 1.5 seconds or something like that. So anyone with like an instant on-demand stun or silence could just interrupt you casting the ability. And I can't remember if it actually went on cooldown if that happened, or if it just like cancelled the channel and refunded the cooldown. I'm not entirely sure. But either way, like you just got interrupted out of the channel constantly, and you also couldn't move. You like rooted yourself when you were firing it, which made it pretty hard to like lead your target. And it was just terrible in general, and they added this as a feature later on where you have CC immunity and actually be able to move. And it turned what was one of the worst ultimates in the game into one of the best, so yeah, definitely a good change there. Feature number 13, Honbat's monkey being able to teleport to the same minion more than once. So this really helped Honbat's in terms of like his jungle clear, because beforehand, the monkey could only bounce to each target once, and that's still how it works for gods. You can't bounce it between 2 gods like 4 times. But it means that you can throw your monkey at like the back minion of a camp. It'll hit the back minion, and then bounce back to the back minion. So you get like essentially a double hit on the back minion. And it really helped Honbat's jungle clear. And that's not how it originally worked at release. You could only hit each minion once. Back to KABRAKAN for feature number 14. KABRAKAN's 1 didn't originally have haste. And I'm also going to throw in Daji's 1 not having haste as well into this, because it's like a very similar situation. So with these 2 abilities, you generally like to they're like attack speed steroids that you want to be able to confirm onto people, and often you want to run at people with them. KABRAKAN's 1 and Daji's 1. So these 2 didn't originally have haste. So essentially if you sort of ran at someone and then like went for the auto attack but missed, you'd slow yourself down so much and you wouldn't really be able to confirm it after that. So you kind of had to make sure you were going to hit with that first auto attack after casting it. Whereas now that they have haste, it's not really a big problem, especially with KABRAKAN's 1. Like, you'll often see a lot of KABRAKAN players just like spamming auto attacks with the 1 running at people, and that's because it has haste. It didn't originally have it. Fact number 15, Isis 3 giving a HP shield. So this one isn't really a huge change, but it was nice for Isis. Like, her 3, they increased the range of it a lot and also made it so that it gives you a HP shield when you cast it, and it just makes her a little bit safer. Feature number 16, CHIRON'S 1 applying the mark for his 2. So once again, a pretty small feature, but this one had a pretty large impact because CHIRON'S clear in the past wasn't amazing, but now that he can like 1 the wave, apply that mark to all 6 and then 2 the wave on all 6, it actually makes his clear pretty damn good, and it makes him sort of a more functional mid laner, allows him to play Mage's Blessing a lot more effectively if he's playing mid, and it just gives him better clear overall, which definitely improved him. Speaking of ADCs with little improvements, feature number 17 is NEITH 2 stealing attack speed from gods. So this is probably the most recent change on this list. This happened in the mid-season patch, so NEITH 2, essentially, if you hit an enemy god with it, instead of just reducing attack speed, it will steal attack speed, so you'll increase NEITH's attack speed as well. So that's just a nice feature for it to have, to be able to like box hunters a little better in the duo lane. Feature number 18, the 0.4 second cooldown refund on Rama's ultimate every time an Astral arrow is picked up. This one's also pretty recent, though I don't think quite as recent as the NEITH changes, or it might have been in the same patch actually, but both of these 2 are pretty recent. But yeah, having the cooldown reduction on Rama's ultimate means that essentially it's sort of like changing it from like a 90-second cooldown down to like an 80 or a 70-second cooldown, because some ultimates are like that, where they have a slightly lower cooldown than 90, and some also have a slightly higher cooldown than 90, like Honbat's ult, for example. But Yeah, it's basically like making Rama's ult one of the ones that's on a slightly lower cooldown, which is a very good change for him in my opinion. Feature number 19, KALDR being able to leap forward when you use SKADI's ultimate. So when SKADI was originally released, this wasn't the case, and when you summoned the snowstorms, it was just like around where KALDR was, and you'd have to like put KALDR on an enemy first before you ulted, whereas now you can just kind of ult and target an enemy, and like KALDR will immediately jump to them, which is a pretty big change for her. It allows her to use her ultimate a little more freely. And finally, feature number 20, Thor's bonus lightning damage on his ultimate after landing. So once again, this one's pretty recent. I think this was around like season 6 or something like that when they reworked Thor. But I wouldn't really consider this a rework. Like, I would consider the Thor's 3 to be a rework, but this was more of just like an additional bonus effect on his ultimate. So on Thor's original release, all the ultimate would do was like you land down, you do AoE damage and you stun, and that was it. Whereas now, of course, you get that lightning on your hammer where your abilities and auto attacks after landing do bonus damage. So that was a feature that wasn't originally around at Thor's release. Well, that's it from me for 20 features that we all take for granted today that weren't around at the release of these gods. If you have any other features, I'm sure there are some, then leave them down below and I might make a part 2 of this video if there's enough features to do so. Let me know how many of these you knew didn't exist at release down below, and don't forget to drop a like before you leave. I'll catch you guys in another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.